The storm outside was going absolutely mental. Rain lashing against the windows, thunder grumbling like a grumpy old man in the distance. Inside the penthouse suite, the lights were low, throwing long, moody shadows across the plush velvet and pricey artwork. It smelt of whiskey, knackered flowers, and something far more raw, like sheer terror. Lyla stood by the window, her silhouette framed by flashes of lightning. Her little black dress clung to her like a second skin. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with a flood of notifications. Gold digger. Shameless. How much did he pay you this time? She couldn't bring herself to even look at the bloody thing. Across the room, George was slumped in the armchair, shirt unbuttoned, his chest rising and falling in uneven gasps. His eyes, usually sharp, cold, impossible to read like a poker player's, were proper glassy now, rimmed red, as if he hadn't had a wink of sleep in days, maybe weeks even. Lyla turned, her voice barely a whisper, thick with the weight of things left unsaid. Tell me it's not true. George didn't look at her. His gaze was fixed on the storm outside, the glass practically trembling in its frame. Which part? His voice was hoarse, almost a rasp. That I'm a gold digger? That I mugged you off? Or that you're dying and you never even bothered to tell me? The words cracked open something between them, something fragile and proper shaky. Lyla's breath caught in her throat. She crossed the room, her heels silent on the plush carpet. Her hands trembled as she reached for him, but he flinched, just barely but enough to notice. Don't, he muttered, his voice barely a breath. Don't make this any harder, love. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. The storm outside mirrored the proper blinder of a storm inside her, a swirl of grief, pure rage, and a helpless kind of love. 2 years, she whispered, her voice cracking. 2 years and you couldn't trust me with this? What the hell? He closed his eyes, his hand tightening into a fist on the armrest. Memories flooded her mind, sharp, vivid, like old film reels playing in reverse. The night had the kind of glow that only proper doshi could buy. Golden lights spilling over crystal chandeliers, the hum of expensive champagne being poured, the clink of glasses, the soft murmur of Lagos's most swanky lot gathered under one roof. Lyla moved through the crowd like she owned it, even though she felt like a right chancer with every step. Her gown was a statement, blood-red silk that hugged her curves, a slit high enough to cause a fair few whispers. The cameras loved her, the men watched her, and the women whispered behind their champagne flutes, proper gossiping. But she wasn't there for them. She was there to host, to be seen, to remind everyone that despite the divorce, despite the rumors, despite the vultures circling, Lyla was still standing in it. And then she saw him, George. He stood at the far end of the ballroom, half hidden in the shadows, dressed in black like the night itself. No smile, no entourage, just him, tall, broad-shouldered, impossible to ignore. A man whose name built empires but who never showed up for the parties, the posh gatherings like this. Their eyes met. Her breath hitched, just for a moment, but it was enough. He held her gaze steady, unblinking, as if he was reading the truth beneath the makeup, beneath the carefully curated persona. And for a second, the room fell away. The music dimmed, the whispers faded. It was just him and her, and the air between them thick with something dangerous. She forced a smile, the kind she'd mastered for the cameras, and crossed the room with practiced grace. "Didn't think you were the type for these events," she said, her voice light, teasing. "Thought you were more of a behind-the-scenes geezer." George's eyes flickered to her lips, then back to her eyes. His expression barely shifted, just the hint of a smirk, so faint it could have been imagined. "Neither did I," he replied, his voice low, smooth like aged whiskey. A beat. The air buzzed. "You're the music mogul, right?" she pressed, playing the part even though she knew exactly who he was. The one who never lets anyone close, the private type. George's gaze sharpened like a blade drawn slow. "And you're the woman who wears diamonds like armor," he said, his tone measured, soft enough to be dangerous. Her breath caught. She wasn't sure if it was from the compliment or the dig. Before she could reply, the MC's voice boomed across the room, calling her to the stage. The moment shattered like glass. She left him standing there, his eyes following her every step. And though she couldn't see it, a slow, dark smile crept across his face. The kind that hinted at trouble, at a story that was just beginning, a proper messy one. The room smelt like burnt coffee, old leather, and ambition. Faint bass beats pulsing from hidden speakers, a low hum in the air, like the place itself was breathing. It was past midnight, the city outside alive with distant sirens and neon lights, but in here, the world had shrunk to 4 walls and 2 people. Lyla sat on the couch, phone in her hand but unread. She looked a bit out of place in the dim studio, a woman made for cameras and lights, now slouched in an oversized hoodie she'd grabbed from the back seat of her motor. Her makeup was smudged, hair messy from running her hands through it too many times, but in the soft glow of the studio lights, she looked more real than she ever did on magazine covers, a bit more bare, you know. George sat at the mixing desk, sleeves rolled up, focus etched deep into the lines of his face. His fingers hovered over the controls, adjusting levels, rewinding, replaying. A man in his element chasing perfection. Pure grafter, that one. She watched him for a while, the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the faint crease at the corner of his mouth when he heard something he liked. It was hypnotic, the way he listened, not just to the music, but to the spaces between the sounds, like he was listening for secrets no one else could hear, like he was proper tuning in. Finally, she couldn't take the silence anymore. "Is this what you do all night?" she asked, her voice soft, teasing. George didn't look up. "Some nights," he replied, eyes still on the screen. "And the other nights?" He paused, the smallest flicker of a smirk tugging at his lips. "Depends on who I'm with, doesn't it?" The air shifted, her pulse skipped. "You don't seem like the type who stays," she said, a little sharper than she meant to, like he was a runner or something. George finally turned, his eyes locking on hers, dark, intense, like a weight pressing down on her chest. "And what type do I seem like, Lyla?" She swallowed, caught in the pull of him, the heat in the room thick and unspoken. The type who doesn't let anyone get too close. A bit closed off, yeah? His gaze held hers, steady, almost daring. "Maybe I'm just waiting for someone worth the risk." Her breath hitched. She looked away, biting her lip to keep them from saying something reckless. George leaned back in his chair, watching her like he could see the thoughts tumbling in her head. "You think you know me?" he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "But you don't, love. Not really." She looked back at him then, something sparking behind her eyes. Maybe I'm not afraid to give it a proper go. The room went quiet, thick with tension, charged with something dangerous. Then, without a word, he turned back to the soundboard, hitting play. The music filled the space, low, haunting, a beat that seemed to mirror the pounding in her chest. They sat in silence, both pretending to focus on the song, but neither of them heard a thing. It wasn't supposed to be them, not a chance. It was meant to be a quick dinner, a straightforward business meeting at the penthouse, but somehow it had turned into wine, expensive and smooth, the kind that tasted like regret waiting to happen. Hair loose around her shoulders, glass in hand. She was laughing at something he'd said, a proper belly laugh, the kind that cracked open her guarded exterior and let the girl inside peek through. There was a sort of rawness to him tonight, tired but dangerous, like a man trying to outrun the weight of the world on his chest. A proper heavy load. The music played softly in the background, a track she'd never heard before, haunting and beautiful, the kind that made you feel like you were floating underwater. She caught him staring, her laughter faded, her smile lingering but softer now. "What?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. George's eyes didn't waver. He looked at her like he was memorizing the moment, like he knew he'd never get it back. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly, the words slipping out before he could stop them, like he'd just let a secret slip. She blinked, caught off guard. Her heart started to race, a slow, steady thrum in her chest. "And what did you expect?" she whispered. He leaned forward, slow, deliberate, closing the space between them inch by inch. His hand brushed against hers on the table, the contact electric sending a shiver up her spine. "I thought you were just another pretty face," he said, his voice low, rough, almost broken. "But you're more than that. You're fire, and I'm not sure I know how to handle you, Lyla." The air between them crackled. Lila's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, to deflect with a joke, but the words got lost somewhere in her chest. She looked at him, the faint lines around his eyes, the exhaustion buried beneath his sharp suits and cold stares. The way his gaze softened when it landed on her, like she was something he didn't deserve but couldn't help wanting. A proper desire, that. Her voice was barely a breath when she said it. "Then don't handle me, just let it happen." George's jaw clenched, the muscle ticking as if he was fighting himself. Then he leaned in, and the world seemed to tilt. His mouth brushed hers, soft, hesitant, like a question. Her eyes fluttered shut, her breath hitching. The kiss deepened, slow and deliberate. A collision of everything they had been pretending not to feel. "Tell me this isn't a mistake," she whispered. George's forehead rested against hers, his breath warm on her skin. "It's the biggest mistake I'll ever make," he whispered back, his voice rough and raw. "But I can't stop, can I?" Two people on the edge of a cliff, hearts racing, waiting for the fall. The sun blazed too bloody bright, spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city in all its chaotic beauty. But neither of them was looking. Lyla sat perched on the edge of the bed, the bedsheet wrapped tight around her like a last line of defense against the storm raging in her chest. Her hair was a proper mess, mascara smudged, lipstick faded, but it was the look in her eyes that stripped her bare, sheer panic, raw and rising. Behind her, George was propped against the headboard, watching her like a man who just realized he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. And the space between them was thick, loaded with the weight of what they'd just done. Neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't just awkward, it was suffocating, buzzing with unspoken words and the thudding realization of consequences that hadn't even started to unfold yet. When Lyla finally moved, shoulders tense, the sheet slipping as she reached for her dress, George's voice cut through the quiet. "Don't do that." She froze, back still to him, breath hitching. "Don't do what?" she asked, voice brittle, sharp as glass. "Don't pretend like last night didn't happen, love." She let out a sharp, bitter laugh, too loud, too forced, like a bad joke in a funeral home. "I'm not pretending, George, I'm just trying to get by." George sat forward, eyes darkening, like storm clouds gathering over the city skyline. "You think I'm the enemy, don't you?" That stopped her. She spun, eyes blazing, hair wild, breath quick. "George, this..." She gestured between them, frantic. "Wasn't supposed to happen. We said no lines, no mess, strictly business. And what if I don't want that anymore?" His voice was low, rough, like he was confessing something he shouldn't. The words just hung there, thick in the air, a shift neither of them were ready for. Lyla's breath caught. For a second, just a blink, she saw it. The future they could have had. The one where she let herself believe in something more than survival, more than just getting by. But the moment shattered. Her phone buzzed, sharp, urgent, relentless, a proper racket. She glanced down, her personal assistant. She picked up, half distracted, then froze. Her eyes snapped to the screen, headlines flashing, bold, screaming. Sex tape of Lyla, Largo's queen pin with unknown man exposed. Her stomach dropped, hands trembling, breath coming in sharp gasps. "This wasn't supposed to get out," she whispered, the panic rising like bile in her throat. George's voice was cold, brutal, like he'd been through this rodeo before. "It always gets out, Lyla. That's the game, innit?" She stared at him, the realization hitting her like a punch to the gut. "I can't stay here," she whispered, shaking her head. George's voice softened, low, like a plea. "Lyla." But she was already moving, snatching up her dress, shoving her feet into her heels, hands fumbling, breath ragged. George moved two quick strides, and he was there, his hand wrapping round her wrist, firm, warm, desperate. "Don't walk away from me, not now. And your sex tapes on the bloody internet. What the hell, Lyla?" She looked at him, really looked, and something inside her just snapped. Shame, guilt, rage, betrayal. It was all there, tangled and tearing her apart. "I have to go now," she whispered, barely audible, tears pooling in her eyes. She pulled free, her shame, her fury, her heartbreak swallowing her whole. And as the door clicked shut behind her, George just stood there, alone in the echo of everything they'd just lost.
Cold air pricks my skin, lost fading light. Darkness pulls me in. Mind's a haunted maze, tracing lines of pain. Eyes that pierce the haze, crying out in vain. In the shadows echoes call.